All right, this is part two to 37 conversations, 37 films. Waiting for my brother to rejoin me real quick. All right, there he goes. You just hop back on. He's about to come up right now. All right, baby boy, you're back up. So you're on Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with Sidney Portier.
Yes. Kind of going into a little bit of a conversation in depth about that. I think this movie, like I said, is important in regards to me because I think you and I both have interracial relationships in the past, things like that. Currently in relational relationships. The movie focuses on what it's like to bring an African American guy home for the first time to your family and introduce, what that dynamic is. We've seen the iteration of this in, a new or newer day and age of
Ashton
Bernie Mac
Kutcher.
and Ashton Kutcher.
Yeah.
Obviously, that movie was more comedic. Rest in peace of Bernie Mac for sure. That movie was more comedic, but in the time obviously this movie was made, it was a very serious issue. Bringing somebody who uh, clearly obviously didn't look like you, wasn't part of your culture, home to your family, especially an African American man. So Sidney Poitier obviously deals with that, deals with the barriers of dating in a relationship, coming home to meet somebody's family who might not accept him. I've for
Yeah.
sure been in that circumstance myself. Um, it's a hard barrier to overcome. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. Um, and I think that the best you could possibly do in some of those circumstances is just to, hopefully come together with your partner and figure out how you guys can both either rise above that situation, educate the people that are around you in that situation, family members, parents, whatever, so it doesn't end negatively. And if you can't come to a accord, hopefully you guys can break on a cordial manner. But yeah, it's a very very strong movie, and I think Sidney Poitier did a great job. I mean, to this day, like Sidney Poitier is awesome.
That man. Yeah, he's that man. That movie, I mean, it came out in what, the 50s?
Definitely the 50s.
Yeah, so them broaching that topic of race and interracial marriages and such, and interracial relationships at that time was huge. Um,
Right.
all right, and actually, Sidney Poitier is in he's in another one of my movies that I'll bring up a little bit later. So my next one is 42. So 42 is the movie about Jackie Robinson and him breaking the color barrier in Major League Baseball. Harrison Ford plays Branch Rickey. What's the brother's name, Brandon? Chad,
Chadwick Boseman.
Chadwick. Yeah, exactly. He plays Jackie Robinson. Great movie, very well made. I think Harrison Ford kills it as Branch Rickey. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
yeah, he was the man. So everyone knows the story of Jackie Robinson. If you haven't seen 42, check it out. So it's enough about that.
definitely. Ironically, back to back on mine is another Sidney Poitier movie, In the Heat of the Night. In the Heat of the Night, if any of you guys ever grew up with parents who watched shows from like the late 80s, early 90s, I'm sure you probably watched In the Heat of the
TV
Night at
show.
some point in time.
Yeah,
It was a
it's a
TV
TV show.
show
Yeah,
based off of this movie.
yeah.
Sidney Poitier is an FBI agent basically that comes up from up north to figure out a crime that took place in the South. Can't remember the white officer's name. He played his ass off in that role. There's a part of the movie where Sidney Poitier is approaching this plantation owner. It's set in 60s time frame, but this guy nonetheless still owns a cotton plantation, and I guess he feels like Sidney Poitier kind of mouths off to him. He slaps him in the face, and Sidney Poitier slaps him right back. And the officer looks at him, and he's kind of just like, the guy looks at the officer. He's like, "You let that happen?" And he's like, I don't know what you want me to do about it.
Yeah.
That's his name is Mr. Tibbs in the movie. Sidney Poitier has to deal with the barrier of being an authority figure because he's one down there to help them solve a crime that they need his help for, but two,
Black.
he's black. And he's trying to figure out, okay, you're supposed to see me as an authority being black. I'm supposed to be an authority just in science in my title. I'm an agent of the law. So he really has to figure out how to circumvent the racism of the South and kind of get some dignity and to make sure everything kind of fits together. I'm not going to ruin the story for you, but Sidney Poitier, he acts his ass off in that movie as well.
Yeah, he's the man for sure. So my next movie is Fruitvale Station. I think Fruitvale Station, if you haven't seen Fruitvale Station, that movie is amazing. Basically what it's about is the last 24 hours of Oscar Grant's life. Oscar Grant was a young black man who was killed unarmed by the police department, by the police, and by a policeman in Oakland. It was Oakland,
Yeah.
right, Grant?
Yeah.
And in fact, Oscar Grant was handcuffed, face down on the ground, and was shot in the back and killed by a police officer. So, what's my dude's name, man, from Creed?
You're talking about Michael Jordan. Michael B. Jordan.
Yeah, Michael B. Jordan plays Oscar Grant in that movie. And, yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen Fruitvale Station, you gotta watch Fruitvale Station. In the name Fruitvale Station, that's
the last stop.
Right. Right. So on the tram that they have there for their public transportation, it's an amazing movie, and Michael B. Jordan does a great job. So Fruitvale Station was my next one.
I might be wrong, but I think they actually mash up together at the end of that film what actually happened.
Oh no, they showed actually.
And like what took place with Michael B. Jordan. So like see like what took place.
If I'm not mistaken, that the actual footage of him being killed is actually the opening scene to that movie, and then they go backwards. That's what happens.
Okay.
So and then they go backwards, and then it plays out for the last 24 hours of his life.
Yeah. Sad nonetheless.
Yeah.
But yeah, rest in peace, Oscar Grant for sure.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Next movie on mine is going to be Green Book. Green Book with Mahershala Ali and Viggo Mortensen. Viggo Mortensen plays basically just a guy kind of from around the way and I want to say like Brooklyn or the Bronx in New York. Mahershala Ali is a PhD musician. He's an accredited guy and he's traveled all around the world and he needs a driver. He gets this guy who isn't fond of African Americans at that point in time in history. He wasn't just fond of very many people that weren't Italian in general. It kind of goes back to the do the right thing circumstance that you were mentioning a moment ago. And they really grow a friendship throughout the story. You see Mahershala Ali he looks down on Viggo Mortensen's character because he feels like, not that he's beneath him, just that he since he already understands how he sees him a different way, he's not going to give him the time of day to educate him on why his culture is one way or the other and why he is how he is as far as being very refined and very astute type of character. At the end, you see they kind of come together and I won't ruin it for anybody, but it's no mystery that those guys remained friends throughout the years, and obviously that's why the movie was made. Viggo Mortensen's son actually made the movie.
Yep.
Was part of making the movie, and I think it really shows how difficult it was being an African American, no matter what status yet again that you have reached in society. A guy that made a good amount of money for that time frame in the 50s, 60s. Still had to stay. They used a Green Book to stay at certain hotels in the South because you couldn't stay at other hotels, basically that were meant for white people. So it really hits on the racism of what you are and aren't able to do, no matter what your status is, essentially.
No doubt. So my next one is called The Long Walk Home. And The Long Walk Home has to do with the bus boycotts that took place after Rosa Parks was arrested on the bus. I see you wearing your Rosa Parks shirt right there. That's what's up. No doubt. People don't know. I wore mine yesterday in the last conversation. I mailed my brother. I mailed my brother a shirt, girl, earlier this week. But at any rate, the Montgomery bus boycott. So after Rosa Parks got arrested, there was a bus boycott for over a year. And the main
368 days or something like that.
Yeah, and the main people that utilized the bus were black people in Montgomery, and it crippled their
economy.
well, not so much the economy, but the financing of the bus system, the bus line.
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So it was after that that they integrated the bus system because they were like, listen, we essentially need them to come back. So the reason why the Long Walk Home is so important is that not only and Whoopi Goldberg is in this as well. And the reason why this is so important is not only does it highlight the aspects and the details of the Montgomery bus boycott, but it also shows the buying power that African Americans have in this country, especially when they're the sole. Not so. I shouldn't
At
say
that time,
primary. Yeah, the primary purchasers of a product. And in Montgomery, in this particular instance, it was bus fares. So when them boycotting the bus system, the fact that it was integrated, and the fact that they arrested Rosa Parks under the circumstances that they arrested her. I mean, Montgomery came around and they said, okay, we'll integrate the bus system. And that's what happened because they boycotted for over a year. People didn't think they would be able to stick to it, but they did.
Yeah. Up next for me is Car Wash. People might be more familiar with the newer age version of Car Wash with like Snoop and Dre and all that stuff, but
not that one.
Yeah, not that one. The Car Wash that some may not have seen are going to be the one with Richard Pryor. You have to think Bill Duke, if you've seen, Menace to Society. Who else is in that movie? Richard Pryor stands out the most because, I mean, obviously Richard Pryor was a big comedian at the time. But basically just I would kind of say like a coming of age story and a short story of that movie of how you have one individual who kind of sees things a little more liberally and is more free thinker, smoker, and the mishaps of that movie of really dealing with what it's like to work in the inner city and be an inner city, I guess, on your grind, I guess, from a certain point or perspective. Richard Pryor's character is the main character you follow throughout the movie, essentially. But there's many people that come in throughout the movie and play their parts and really show you what it's like to be a part of a community, even though that community centers around essentially a car wash or centers around like your local business to a certain extent.
And I'll expand on that, Brandon. I also say, man, that Car Wash is a good movie because it just encapsulates the 70s pretty well. You know what I'm saying? And then also, like, it also should be known that Car Wash is considered a blaxploitation film. And
it is.
Yeah, something to be known about that, even though I don't think that Car Wash is really considered like other blaxploitation films, because for those who are not familiar with the blaxploitation era, in the, early 70s, throughout the 70s, and maybe even into the early 80s, you had certain films that were considered blaxploitation because they exploited black people. So even though some of these movies were even made by black people, some of the main characters were pimps, or they were robbers, or they were prostitutes, or whatever the case may be. So
it played very heavily on the stereotypes of our society.
Right, exactly, drug users. So that's why that's why that genre is called the blaxploitation era. But I don't see there being really, I don't take offense or have, any, aspersions I would cast on Car Wash per se. I think it's a good film to check out. My next one is Separate But Equal. Separate But Equal. Sidney Poitier plays Thurgood Marshall, and it's based on a true story, actual facts and such and occurrences. Separate But Equal covers the story of Brown versus the Board of Education, in which throughout segregation, separate but equal was law of the land in the South. And Brown versus the Board of Education, the Supreme Court determined that they found separate but equal unconstitutional. And at that point in time, it essentially ended segregation in the South. So Separate but Equal is amazing. Thurgood Marshall then went on. He was the actual attorney that argued that case in front of the Supreme Court. And of course, he went on to become a Supreme Court justice.
Right.
And so that movie's heavy. That's a really good film.
Next on my list is Crash, a movie that has a cast that's stacked. You have Don Cheadle in there. You have Chris Bridges, also known as Ludacris. You have Lawrence Tate. You have Sandra Bullock. You have Brendan Fraser.
Is Benicio del Toro in that movie or no?
No, you're thinking of Traffic.
Oh, okay, gotcha. That's on the same time.
Yeah. Crash is a movie that is one of those. It's honestly kind of Quentin Tarantino-esque. Everything wraps into one another in that film. And
What's the
I
cop?
want to say
What was that cop's name? The white cop that's in that movie? You know what I'm talking
that was Dylan, something Dylan, I want to
about?
say. Matt Dillon. That was Matt Dillon. And who was the woman that in that movie that he's trying to get out of the car? That's it has Terrence Howard in there.
Terrence Howard, that's his wife, right?
That's yeah. I can see her face right now. It'll come to
Not
me in a
Kerry
little bit.
Washington.
No, 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 no.
Yeah,
Well, it has Michael Pena in there.
yeah.
There's a lot of stories that intertwine into the not just the Black experience, but the experience. I think as a POC culture, there's a point in the movie where Thandie Newton. Thank you very much, Sarah. It's Thandie Newton. There's a point in which so in the very beginning of the movie where Brendan Fraser and Sandra Bullock they get carjacked for their like Escalade or Yukon, whatever it is, and they're getting their locks changed on their doors, and Sandra Bullock says very blatantly in front of Michael Pena, who's actually changing their locks. I want to make sure these are the only keys because I don't want any of his homies to have these keys. And Michael Pena is like, you kind of have me messed up right now. Like why would you even say that? I think it's important because it shows sometimes the privilege that's out there for people to believe that there aren't good people out there willing to like do things for them or put themselves in the right frame of mind. Sandra Bullock, yet she might have been traumatized from what took place. She herself felt like she had the right to say something like that to Michael Pena, who was there helping her and get her back on track. Little other
with the broad brush, with the broad stroke.
Exactly. Little other stories really link into one another in that movie and really exploit, I think, some of the things that people don't really want to talk about. This is a conversation for another day or another live, but I had a pretty knockdown, drag out conversation with an ex at one point in time saying that's not reality. When the reality is that people actually do think those things, and some of the things that happen in that movie does take place. People really have those types of feelings towards one another when they're in places of privilege and places of opportunity. So definitely, I think that's a watchable movie. I want to say that movie won Best Film, if not was at least nominated for Best Film.
Yeah, it won some awards, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's a solid movie.
Yeah, no doubt. So my last one is Higher Learning. Higher Learning, man. You're talking like that movie. If you ever
That's on the head in the early '90s. That's on the head of what the experiences for people in the early '90s.
There are so many themes in Higher Learning. Okay, so first of all, you have Michael Rappaport in Higher Learning. You've got Busta Rhymes. You've got
Ice Cube.
You've got Tyra Banks. Omar Epps.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think who else is in Higher Learning.
Lawrence Fishburne's also in that movie.
Yeah, Lawrence Fishburne. Right. So
he was educating the young black men of the United States for a while.
Yeah. So there are so many themes in Higher Learning. You've got sexual assault in that movie. You've got white supremacy is covered in that movie. You've got black students who are trying to assimilate in what we would call a PWI, a predominantly white institution, trying to find their place in that institution. You've got a school shooting. You've got a
mass shooting
that takes place in that movie. And it's just there's a love story. I mean, it's just like there's a lot in that movie, and I think that the way that speaks. I mean, Higher Learning is purely fictional, but
another John Singleton film.
Yeah, John Singleton. Yep, shout out to him. But the reasons that I just expressed to you, for those reasons, it's so important to the context that we're experiencing, and it relates to what we're experiencing right now, especially as it relates to race, as it relates to which is the biggest theme I think in that movie, white supremacy, which that's an experience, especially that takes place in that movie, that I don't think many people experience, but it's real. It's real. There's a population of people of color who do experience the type of white supremacy that Omar Epps and Tyra Banks' characters experience in that movie. and that movie's legit. You know what I'm saying?
Very.
And if you know Michael Rappaport, and as you know, aware and how as woke as he is as it relates to, social justice and such, that character of Remy that he played
is very opposite of himself.
My God, it's the complete opposite of the person that he is, but he killed it. I mean,
yeah,
he was amazing in that movie. So you got to see Higher Learning. That's everything, right, Brand?
My last one, actually, to speak on the topic of that one and white supremacy that they experienced in that movie, American History X.
That's right.
Yeah. American History X has Edward. Why would I forget his last name?
Norton Jr.
Edward Norton Jr. Basically, what you're seeing is someone who, in his family, doesn't get along. He's kind of the outcast because he feels like African Americans around him and POCs as a whole are out there to get them, and he encapsulates all the things he believes to be the negative stereotypes of each one of those cultures, and he ends up getting into a situation in the beginning of the movie which sends him to jail, becomes reformed in prison, and really realizes that the people he thought were down to ride for him, and he was down to ride with that whole entire time, with that fascist, Nazism, KKK white supremacy frame of mind, really weren't out there for him. And one of the people that were really there for him was some of the black people in prison, based off of some of the things that were taking place. So I think that movie really shows people, and it's full circle, because if I tell what happens at the end of the movie, I'll completely mess it all up. But it's full circle of someone really realizing, what's happening in, their day and age of, I'm so encapsulated in what I believe to be right and what I believe to be the right thing to do, to the people you believe to have your back and to believe to be there really aren't down for you, and wanting to change yourself and to be a different person. And that being a different circumstance. I feel like I'm trying to be so cryptic.
Yeah, don't get away. You're good. You're
good. there's a lot in the movie that
even the aspect of the fact that just the manipulation that took place to, let's just say what it is, have this guy become a white supremacist. You know what I'm saying? Like basically it is what it is. So,
right.
And some of those undertones and those feelings and those thoughts are present in society, and they've been even more present and even more evident in society in our past. And there's a very iconic and very memorable, people talk about that scene in American History X too. That
Terrence just brought it up. Yeah,
that curve. Yeah. So anyway, that's a heavy movie. I'm actually going to, we had 37 films that we talked about tonight, and actually there was 38 with 37 with the asterisk, because I talked about Birth of a Nation, but I talked about both versions of them.
Nice.
But I'm gonna do 39 and 13th. So Ava DuVernay actually made that documentary as well. 13th is amazing. So as we all know, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't state that. As many of us know and probably are very familiar, and most people are probably very familiar, the 13th Amendment is the one that abolishes, that said that slavery is illegal in the United States, but for people who commit crimes. And that documentary is a timeline, if you will, from the time in which the 13th Amendment was ratified up until present day. And it talks about how, the United States has 5% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the people incarcerated on the planet. So even though we have 5% of people in the world, 25% of the people that are locked up in jail are in the United States. And of course, something like 6.5% of Americans are black men or black people, I think, or something like that. But blacks comprise something like 40% of our jail and prison population. But aside from just those statistics, 13th is amazing because it provides context. It provides context as to how, there are very specific policies that have, contributed to, the mass incarceration of people of color in this country. From, the 94 crime bill that was signed by Bill Clinton, which he has now spoken out against,
Stop and frisk.
Say it again.
Stop and frisk and the 3-strike rule.
Stop and frisk, stuff like that. The 3 strikes law, out in California, they adopted that. And this is a conversation for another day. But policies like that, and I referenced it last night, my last night's conversation, directly impact the structure of black and brown,
communities.
not just communities, but families in this country. So,
Yeah.
you have people who, speak about, how, some of our brothers and sisters in the Latinx community and the Black community don't grow up without fathers or mothers or whatever the case may be. Well, some of that is as a result of these laws that were put in place essentially to, and in my opinion, mass incarcerate people of color. And, and then not to mention, and this is, I'm going on a tangent, but then you also can talk about, how, what role does our, justice system have in truly rehabilitating people and such like that. So anyway, don't take my word for it though. Watch 13th. 13th is legit. And if, Ava DuVernay, that's the second film that we talked about. This is a documentary. The first one that she did was When They See Us. Brandon covered that earlier. So that's something that's very, that's something I would encourage people to see as well. It's on Netflix. I would be remiss if I didn't say that I think it's Netflix right now, because of this moment that we're in our country, that's providing like free access to a certain number of films or certain key. Is it Netflix or is it Amazon?
HBO.
HBO's
doing
it. HBO's doing that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I misspoke then. Netflix is providing a, if you will, like a suggested viewing list of films such as the ones that we talked about today. I didn't look at that list because we made up our list based on the movies that we've seen, the movies that we've talked about, the movies that we've come to love based on the Black experience and such. But check out Netflix. They're doing something like that. I was on Amazon Prime last night, and I saw that they had like a Black Lives Matter. We support and stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. I'm sure that they have a section that they're talking about. Yeah, Prime. Terrence is saying Xfinity is doing it. So check those out. These are the ones that that we put our seal of approval on, that we want to suggest for you all to see. But I got some honorable mentions. I know we're running long. I know we're running like super long. This is the longest one that we've had thus far. But I got to run through some. So we've got Brian's Song. Brian's Song came out in the 70s. It's the story of two Chicago Bears football players.
Brian Piccolo.
Yeah, Gale Sayers is a Black guy. Brian Piccolo, who is a white guy. They became best friends on the team during a time of like racial tensions and so on and so forth. Brian Piccolo was sick, passed away, and eventually passed away. And like Gale Sayers is like his best friend and stuff. Brian's Song is amazing. Another one is Straight Outta Compton, and we were toying with putting that on the list, but like Straight Outta Compton, I mean, I think everyone probably has seen that movie, but it does speak to the Black experience as it relates to LA and police brutality and just like how they're perceived and so on and so forth. So I think Straight Outta Compton speaks for itself. What were some other ones, Brandon, that we had on
Juice?
Oh, Juice. Yeah, you're right. So Juice is one of those classic,
Good classics,
urban films, urban classics. You know what I'm saying? Like
it's an urban classic.
People in the Black community love to quote and speak about and talk about. Omar Epps is in that film. That's one of his very first movies, if not his very first.
I was gonna say, if not his very
Queen
first.
Latifah's in that movie as well. I'm gonna skip the other honorable mentions, Brandon, but I will mention one last one as I close out, and that's Set It Off. So you and I talked about this earlier, and I remember you were like, I'm not so sure, but the reason why I think Set It Off is going to be an honorable mention for me is because you got 4 women in this movie. Brother, I can't remember the third girl, but there's Queen Latifah, Vivica Fox, Jada Pinkett, and then I can't remember the fourth girl. She's a lesser known actress on the cast, but at any rate, they each have trials that were systemic that they dealt with at the beginning of that movie that essentially leads them to a life of crime, if you will. They go on, robbing banks and stuff. That's not giving anything away, because if you were to watch the trailer for Set It Off, you would see that.
Right.
So, but anyway, I mean, I think that speaks a little bit to the Black experience. I mean, LGBTQ challenges and issues. I mean, Queen Latifah was she played a woman that was a lesbian in that film. So there are those aspects as well, and those are certainly matters that are impacting the Black community as well. So listen, man, we gotta cut it, bro. We ran long and everything, but I think this was a good conversation, bro. Thank you for making time, man, and joining me tonight. Of course. And going over these 37 with a star with an asterisk films. I think we did 39 total. As well as some honorable mentions, which probably took us about 43 or 44 or so. But yo, bro, be safe out there, man. God bless you, dog. And
I love you, man.
I love you too, man. Be talking to you soon.
Mob.
All right, come on.